Starting next month, it'll be $2,800 for the guest room. Or you can start looking for somewhere else to stay." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. Around the Thanksgiving table, everyone fell into stunned silence. Even Emma, my 8-year-old granddaughter, froze with mashed potatoes on her spoon. Kayla sat across from me, lips pursed into a polite little smile, as if she'd just offered me more cranberry sauce. She slid a crisp document across the table, her freshly manicured nails tapping once on the top corner. "It's all here," she added. "Standard lease agreement. Utilities included." I stared at the paper but didn't reach for it. My hands stayed in my lap. I looked to my son Drew sitting beside her, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at his plate, pushing green beans around like a teenager being scolded. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "I'm sorry what you heard," her Kayla said, taking a dainty sip of wine. "The market rate is actually higher. We're giving you a family discount." The turkey I'd helped roast that morning. Her kitchen, my hands tasted suddenly like chalk. I chewed, swallowed, and set my napkin down slowly. Across the table, my brother-in-law Tom looked as stunned as I felt. My sister-in-law June opened her mouth, but no words came. "Consider it fair," Kayla continued, folding her hands. "You've had a good run here, but with the remodel, the taxes and the rising costs, well, we just can't afford freeloaders anymore." Freeloader. It hit harder than I expected. My heart thudded. I looked at Drew again. His jaw was tight, eyes locked on his plate like it might save him. This was my son. This was my house. Or it used to be. I had left it in his name when Leland died. "Just until I get back on my feet," I'd said. "You'll take care of it." He had nodded then. Now he said nothing. And I realized something else. This had been planned. Kayla didn't just blurt that out. She printed a lease. Drew knew. I folded my hands under the table. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I used to think the hardest day of my life was the day we folded Leland's flag and placed it in my lap. I was wrong. That Thanksgiving night, while Kayla laughed in the kitchen with June like nothing had happened, I sat in my room and looked at the only two things I still truly owned, the Navy lockbox and the flag from Leland's service. This house wasn't always like this. It used to feel like ours. Leland's and mine. We moved in when Drew was 5. A modest place with brick trim and creaky steps, but it was filled with love. Leland planted roses along the fence. We danced barefoot in the kitchen the night the mortgage was paid off. We raised 3 kids under that roof. 40 years of memory in every corner. After Leland passed, the silence was unbearable. Every creak in the hallway felt like him not being there. I'd pour 2 cups of coffee before remembering he wasn't coming down the stairs. I couldn't sit through dinner without feeling the chair beside me empty. It was Drew who said, "Why don't we move in for a while until things settle?" Kayla chimed in, voice honey-sweet. "We'll take care of you." I said yes, not because I needed caretaking, but because I was too tired to be alone. So they moved in. And then slowly, I moved out of decisions of ownership of mattering. I sold the big dining set, donated the guest linens, gave away Leland's tools to the VFW. I kept only what I could fit in 1 suitcase, 1 trunk, and that lockbox. Inside it, our marriage license, military records, birth certificates, and the deed with our names still side by side. I told myself I'd sort it all later. Later never came. Instead, I cooked. I babysat. I folded towels and watched Kayla paint over the nursery I once decorated by hand. She asked sweet questions about Leland, how we met, where we danced. I thought she cared. I see now she was studying the foundation before she took the house apart, brick by brick, and I'd handed her the chisel. I found the agreement folded and slid beneath my door. I hadn't spoken a word since dinner. Not when Kayla cleared the dishes with her fake laughter. Not when Drew passed by the hallway without a glance. I'd washed my plate, dried my hands, and climbed the stairs like a visitor in someone else's home. The paper waited like a wound. It wasn't just rent. A curfew 9 p.m. No guests without prior approval. Kitchen privileges to be discussed monthly. No use of common areas after designated family hours. The word privileges burned. I'd taught Drew to say please before he could tie his shoes. Now his wife was regulating when I could pour a cup of coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed, my bed technically theirs, and held the paper in my lap until the ink blurred from tears. I didn't sob. I just sat there silent while it all sunk in. I had become an obligation, an expense, a tenant. I folded the paper into a sharp square and placed it gently on the nightstand next to my reading glasses, and the pill organizer Kayla had once labeled for me, back when she pretended I was part of this family. I stared at the closet, half empty. My things tucked in plastic bins on the top shelf, the rest packed beneath the bed. That's when I saw the box. Small, battered, the kind Leland kept for anything important. Warranty papers, court records, even old letters from his mother. I hadn't opened it since the move. I pulled it out, dust trailing from the corners, and sat cross-legged on the floor like I was 30 years younger. Inside are mortgage records, his service discharge, a faded photo of him on base, and a folded paper labeled in his neat block print, property, Riverside. The deed. Our names, Harold Leland Haddon and Varel Marie Haddon. No one else. I traced the signature line with my fingertip. Documentation is protection, Vi, he used to say. Keep it close, keep it safe. I didn't sleep that night. But by morning, I had already made my first call. I didn't come down for breakfast. Let them wonder, or not. I doubted they noticed. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted under the door Kayla's go-to when she wanted the house to feel warm and forgiving. I left without a word, purse on my shoulder, lockbox, clutched like a second spine. The teller at the credit union smiled when she saw me. Her name tag read Nia, and she had kind eyes that made it harder not to cry. Just need to check some figures, I said. My Social Security, $1,509.14 a month. Leland's pension, $712.06. Savings, $3,278.33. Enough for 2 months' rent, maybe. 3 if I stopped filling my prescriptions. I nodded at the numbers like they belonged to someone else. Nia asked if I needed help moving funds. No, I said, but I'd like access to my lockbox. Inside, everything was as I left it. Tidy folders. Leland's handwriting. I opened the one marked property, heart hammering. There it was, the original deed notarized and signed in 1989, updated again in 2011 after Leland passed. My name, Varel Marie Haddon, typed in bold. No mention of Drew. I took the papers and drove straight to the title office. The woman at the counter raised an eyebrow when I said my name and the property address. Her typing echoed like gunshots in that sterile space. There's been activity, she murmured. Do you have ID? I handed it over, palms sweating. She clicked again, scanned, then stopped. 6 months ago, she said, there was an attempt to use the property as collateral for a new loan. Application listed 3 parties. Drew Haddon, Kayla Haddon, and you. Me, I never signed a thing. There was a delay, missing documents, some flagged inconsistencies. Looks like it didn't go through, she said, eyes narrowing. But they tried. I nodded, not trusting my mouth to form words. They hadn't just tried to charge me rent. They had tried to use my home to fund their lives. I stepped outside the air too sharp to breathe. The paper trembled in my hand as I dialed the only number that made sense now, Leland's lawyer, if he was still practicing. And if he wasn't, I'd find someone who was. Walter Brennan still used the same office, same clunky phone, same dusty shelves. His voice cracked a little more than it used to, but when I said my name, he didn't miss a beat. Vi Haddon, he said warmly. How long's it been? Too long, I replied, though I wished it hadn't been. I told him what I'd found about the deed, the attempted remortgage, the lease agreement on my nightstand. He went quiet on the other end. Come in. Bring every piece of paper you've got. I sat in his office by noon, my hands folded tight, while he scanned copies, eyes narrowing. By the time he got to the flagged title paperwork, he was no longer quiet. There's more, he said, pulling out his laptop. Let's check your credit profile. I hadn't checked it in years. Leland had always handled the money, and when he died, I kept things simple: bills paid on time, no loans, no cards. But the screen filled with numbers that didn't belong to me. 3 open credit cards, $24,302.17 in debt, all in my name. Applications for a personal loan I never saw. Attempts to attach my property as collateral. Transactions I couldn't explain. They must have used mail redirects, Walter said. Maybe online banking, paperless options. It's all fraud. And it's elder abuse. My stomach turned. Are you ready to fight? He asked, eyes steady on mine. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my hands. These hands had raised Drew, changed his diapers, held Leland's hand while he slipped away, baked the birthday cakes, sewn the hems, cleaned the blood off skinned knees, and wiped noses in the dark. And now those same hands had unknowingly signed nothing but been used for everything. I am, I said, but not loud. Walter smiled. We can do quiet. That night, back in my room, I made myself coffee and sat at the desk. I tore a sheet from my legal pad and wrote just one sentence across the center of the page, slow and steady. Take it back quietly. Then I opened the drawer, placed the note inside, and pulled the agreement from the nightstand. I had my signature to compare now. They showed up at 9:02 a.m. 2 men in matching polo shirts and worn cargo pants, pushing a dolly stacked with flattened boxes. Kayla followed behind them, like she owned the sun, waving her iced coffee like it was a badge of power. The condensation slid down her perfectly manicured fingers as she pointed to the stairwell. That room at the top, she said brightly. Start packing her things, closet drawers, everything. She's being moved today? The taller mover hesitated. Is she aware she's been notified? Kayla said, her smile all teeth. She had her chance. I didn't flinch. I had been waiting for this moment. I stepped into the hallway, calm as Sunday. The movers turned toward me, unsure. Kayla rolled her eyes. Varel, please. Don't make this dramatic. You've had a free ride long enough. This is best for everyone. Without a word, I reached into the folder tucked under my arm and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, neatly folded, was a certified copy of the deed. Walter had walked it over himself the day before. I handed it to the taller mover. His eyes scanned the heading, then the names. His brows lifted. This says, You own the house. I do, I said, voice even. Paid in full since 2011. My name is the only one on that document. He looked to Kayla. Her smile faltered. There's been a misunderstanding, she said quickly. We've been paying the mortgage. This is our house. No, it isn't, I said, stepping between her and the stairs. You've been living in my house. And this, what you're doing now, it's called trespassing. The shorter mover took a full step back. The taller one handed the deed back with a quiet, Ma'am, we'll wait in the truck. They disappeared without another word. Kayla's face flushed with something I'd never seen on her before. Fear. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I tucked the deed under my arm and turned toward the stairs. Don't follow me, I said. I walked to my room, no longer the guest room, and closed the door with a calm I hadn't known in years. And on the other side, I could hear her calling Drew. By the time Drew came home, I was already dressed and waiting. Kayla's voice had been echoing off the walls all morning. Phone calls, pacing, slamming drawers. But I didn't move. I sat on the living room sofa with the folder in my lap, and the front door unlocked. At 2:07 p.m., Walter stepped inside with a deputy in uniform behind him. Drew stopped short in the entryway. "Mom," he said, blinking, like the light hurt. Kayla stormed down the stairs, her voice high and fast. "You can't just barge in here, this is our—" Walter held up a hand. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Varel Haddon, legal owner of this residence. I'm also presenting documentation to the local sheriff's office for prosecution." "For what?" Kayla laughed brittle. "We've done nothing wrong." The deputy said nothing. Just took the thick manila envelope Walter handed him. Inside, signed affidavits of forensic accountants, summary flagged transactions. 3 credit cards in my name, opened without my knowledge, and a timeline tracing every forged attempt to remortgage my home. $24,000 in debt, Walter said. Fraud, identity theft, attempted theft of property, elder financial abuse. Drew turned pale. Kayla's mouth opened again. "This is absurd. This woman's clearly not well." "She's confused." I stood. "I'm not confused." I opened my own folder and laid it on the coffee table. Inside, side by side, my actual signature from the 2011 deed and the shaky forgery from a remortgage application 6 months ago. Copies of credit card statements mailed to an address I'd never seen. Loan inquiries I never authorized. "This isn't just family drama," Walter said calmly. "This is criminal." Kayla's hands clenched. "You don't have the right." The deputy finally spoke. "You have 20 minutes to pack personal belongings. Legal proceedings begin Monday." Drew looked like a balloon slowly deflating. "Mom? Please." "We didn't mean—" "You did," I said quietly. "You just didn't think I'd find out." I turned and walked upstairs. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't look back. He stood outside my bedroom door like a child again, shoulders hunched, fists clenched, eyes rimmed red. But he wasn't a child. Not anymore. He was a grown man in tailored clothes, polished shoes, and a silence that had cut deeper than any word. "She pressured me," Drew whispered. "Kayla, she threatened to leave, take the kids. I didn't know what to do. I didn't speak." I sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded in my lap. He stepped inside anyway. "I thought if we could just get through this year, I'd fix it." We were drowning. Credit cards, school tuition renovations. "She said we had to." She said, "You'd be fine." "Fine." I finally said, my voice quiet. "You watched her hand me a lease at Thanksgiving dinner." Drew winced. "I didn't agree with that." "You didn't stop it." He looked at the floor. I panicked. I stood slowly. "You let your wife call me a freeloader. You sat there while I shook in my seat. While I wiped tears with the same napkin I used to cook your dinner." "Mom?" I didn't know how bad it had gotten. "No," I said, stepping closer. "You just didn't care to look." He broke then, shoulders shaking, tears spilling. "I'm sorry. I never meant I held up a hand. You stood by while I cried into cold coffee and read a rental agreement like a stranger. You forged my name. You sold my trust for a kitchen and a pool. Please, don't do this. Don't turn your back on me." I looked at him, really looked. At the boy I'd raised now, hollowed out by cowardice and choices he couldn't undo. "I already did," I said. "A long time ago." He choked back a sob. "Where am I supposed to go?" I walked past him, opened the door and held it. "Not my concern," I said, steady now. "You have 5 minutes. After that, I call the police again." His mouth opened, but I turned away before he could say another word. Downstairs, I heard the door close behind him. And just like that, the house was quiet. The locksmith finished just after noon. New locks, new codes, new boundaries. I stood alone in the kitchen. Kayla once treated like a showroom marble counters. She financed with my signature custom cabinetry, bought with forged credit pendant lights, chosen without asking what I liked. And yet, it was beautiful. I made coffee. My coffee. No one told me I was in the way. No one sighed or muttered about extra utilities. Just me, the hum of the kettle, and a stillness that felt like exhale after years of holding my breath. Walter stopped by around 3 carrying a folder and a knowing look. "They're gone?" he asked, setting the file on the counter. "Gone," I confirmed, pouring 2 mugs. "Change the locks." "Good. Keep them changed." He glanced around. "They did a number on the place." I nodded, all of it without asking. With money they didn't earn. He pulled a sheet from the folder. "Legally, it's all yours. The renovations paid with stolen funds tied to your name. The law calls it unjust enrichment. The house appreciates, but they don't get a dime." I sipped my coffee and let that sink in. She built her dream home with my stolen credit. And now I lived in it, free and clear. There was something almost poetic about that. Walter left shortly after, promising updates on the civil filings. Not 5 minutes later, Dorothy knocked, holding a ceramic pie dish and wearing the smirk of someone who'd waited years to be proven right. "Apple crumble," she said. "From scratch." We sat at the kitchen table, the one Kayla once used to host her book club, and ate with our fingers like kids. No plates, no pretenses. When the neighbors heard, they trickled in. Just a few at first. Then more. Mrs. Calloway, from 2 doors down, brought a bottle of something sparkly. Edna offered her famous cinnamon rolls. Someone turned on music. Dorothy raised her coffee mug. To women who don't go quietly, I raised mine. To women who remember who they are. And in that remodeled kitchen lit by stolen fixtures and hard-won peace, I laughed. For the first time in years, it sounded like freedom. 6 months had passed. The daffodils in the front yard had bloomed and wilted. The sun shifted higher in the sky, and I had settled into something that felt like living again. Each Tuesday morning, I stood in front of a room at the senior center, holding printouts, a whiteboard marker, and a voice I'd nearly lost. I taught widows and veterans and soft-spoken grandmothers how to freeze their credit reports, spot phishing scams, and read the fine print. I showed them how to log into their bank accounts, how to spot changes in ownership records, how to say no even to family. "They call me paranoid," one woman whispered, once eyes wet. My son said I was overreacting. "No," I told her steady. "You're protecting yourself." The restitution checks came at the end of every month. Small, clipped, mechanical, like apologies printed by machines. Each one signed by the county clerk, drawn from Kayla's and Drew's garnished wages. I didn't spend the money. I stacked the envelopes in a drawer marked recovery, not revenge. Just proof. Drew sent letters too, every other week. I never opened them. Instead, I took them to the backyard fire pit and watched them curl and blacken. He'd already said enough in silence. One afternoon in May, I drove out to Leland's grave, brought fresh flowers, folded the lawn chair he always took to baseball games, and sat by the stone that bore his name. They tried to take everything I told him softly. They nearly did. I read him the latest updates, court outcomes, the workshops, how Dorothy had joined my class even though she claimed she already knew everything. Then I stood, placed my hand flat on the headstone, and whispered, "I remembered what you taught me." I didn't let them win. When I got home, the late afternoon light poured into the kitchen, like forgiveness. I brewed fresh coffee, poured a cup, and stood in the center of the room. The walls were still the color Kayla chose, the pendant lights still hers, but the deed in the drawer was mine, and so was the peace in my chest.